Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by me, Jen Trechek.
And me, Aileen Rutledge.
This podcast is dedicated to exploring the world of occupational therapy, sharing the latest research and techniques and providing insights into the many ways that occupational therapy can help people of all ages live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Whether you are a practicing occupational therapist, a student of occupational therapy, or simply curious about this fascinating field, this podcast is for you. We'll be interviewing experts in the field, sharing stories from the front lines of occupational therapy practice, and providing tips and advice for anyone looking to get the most out of their therapy.
So sit back, relax, and join us on this exciting journey into the world of occupational therapy in Ireland. Educational and sensory toys are a great way to support children's learning and development. And by engaging in play, children can develop important cognitive, physical and social skills. But there are a plethora, I said that word right, a plethora of toys and products available on the market. So to help unpack what to look for, in this episode of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, we spoke to paediatric occupational therapist Aoife Costello.
Aoife is passionate about child and adult development. As well as her paediatric clinic, Aoife set up OT ABC, an online store which provides a range of educational, sensory and motor skill toys and products. These products are hand-picked, trialled and tested by Aoife and provide functional skills that have therapeutic benefits for children and adults of all abilities. Aoife also has a very successful Instagram account where she demonstrates how and why to use her range of products. Hello, Aoife. You're very welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast.
Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here. My first podcast ever.
Thank you very much for joining Jen and I this afternoon. Aoife, we're going to start off just with a very brief background about your journey in becoming an occupational therapist. So can you just share with us about your university placements and why children's occupational therapy was something that piqued your interest?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was doing my Leaving Cert, I suppose a lot of other students, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I always had an interest, I suppose, in healthcare, and I liked the idea of being a healthcare professional, but I just didn't know really what area I suppose was for me. So I started off in DCU, Dublin City University, and I did a 3-year degree in health science. And this, I suppose, gave me a great foundation in kind of overall healthcare and a better insight into the various healthcare professions. And that was 3 years long. And by the end of it, I learned a lot more about occupational therapy. And I suppose what I really liked about it was that it took really a holistic approach. I could work with kids, I could work with the elderly, I could work with any age really, and there was that like mental health aspect and the physical health, and I suppose that's where the interest stemmed from. So I did a 2-year master's then in Norwich in the University of East Anglia in the UK, and I started off, I had 4 placements. So the first one was hand therapy, so it was very specific, and then I had a mental health community placement. I had a community placement focusing on the elderly, and my last placement was paediatrics. And I suppose each placement was very different and gave me a real, I suppose, insight into the different areas. But paediatrics was my last placement, and I actually will never forget the paediatric placement, because although I enjoyed the other placements, I liked working as part of the team, I liked working in the community, I actually didn't have like a massive passion for any of them. I enjoyed them, but I remember it was like in a really country side village in England, and I remember just talking to my supervisor, and I was like, God, I don't know, is this something I necessarily want to do every day, even though I enjoyed it. So she was kind of going through different areas of OT with me as well, and she's like, definitely do one in paediatrics before you finish. And our last placement was an elective placement, and I always was interested in working with kids, but I suppose I didn't know a lot about occupational therapy and children. So I got my elective placement in Dundalk. There was a private clinic there, and I absolutely loved it. I still remember one morning walking in and thinking, God, if I could do this for the rest of my life, like it literally didn't feel like work. And I would have said that, like, I would have found it really, really different from, I suppose, the previous placements. Like the other ones were very equipment driven, and I would have found it a little bit, just from my own personal experience, a little bit repetitive. Whereas what I loved about pediatrics was that every child I seen was completely different. I love the idea of working with kids, but also working with the family. And especially, I suppose, what really I suppose I really enjoyed about it was that, like, every session, like, you see children, you know, make progress, overcome obstacles. I like the idea of the setting the goals and having something to work towards. And I absolutely loved it. So I knew after probably a week of that 8-week placement that pediatrics was the area for me. And I haven't looked back since. I went straight into a pediatric job in Dublin, and I've literally waited in pediatrics since in various different settings.
This is your vocation, Aoife. The passion rings through.
I love hearing an OT who's passionate about her job. It's the best feeling in the world, isn't it? You never work a day when you enjoy it.
Absolutely. Like, it really, and even to this day, that's how I feel about it. You know, and obviously my job has changed massively. I've gone kind of into, like, you know, the business side of it as well, but I would never let go of having the clinic or working directly with children. I think it's one of the most rewarding jobs I think you can have. And when you're seeing kids do so well and, you know, achieving goals, like, there's nothing really not to enjoy about it. So definitely don't regret my
Tell us about that, because you are an OT and you see people, but you've also set up a business selling equipment, as far as I understand. So OT ABC. Tell us about that and how you went down that track.
So it kind of, like, there was no real plan, I suppose, in place. I remember I was working in Dublin. I was working as part of an early intervention team with the HSE. And I would have spent a lot of my free time on Instagram. And I remember one day just, like, looking up on Instagram, like, occupational therapy pages. And there's a fair few now, but at the time, like, I couldn't find any. And because I was spending, like, so much time of my personal time on Instagram, I just remember thinking, like, I could actually use my time so much more wisely. And also, like, as we know, you know, OT isn't accessible for everyone. There's long waiting lists. And I think it just kind of came out of nowhere. And I set up a page on, you know, an evening after work. And I did notice, even though at the beginning I wasn't massively consistent, it was definitely kind of a hobby on the side. I did notice that the page, in terms of followers, started to grow really fast. And I became, like, inundated, like, every day. Even though I might have only had, like, a few posts up, I was getting so many messages about resources and toys and tips. And I suppose that's where the business idea came from. Now, I had probably the Instagram page, I would say, probably a year before I ever set up a store. But the first kind of, I suppose, product as such I had in the store was a subscription box. And the idea was that I could provide a range of different products that might focus on maybe fine motor skills. I might add a gross motor skill product in, a product for maybe a child struggling with sensory processing, whether that was a fidget or a balance cushion. I remember the first box I had was like a blow up balloon, or a blow up beanbag, excuse me. So that's where, and then I would have, like, a booklet explaining how to use every product. And obviously it was completely, like, generic information, but it did really well from the get-go. It was a monthly subscription box of a variety of products, and every month I would change what was included in each box. And I suppose that's where the business idea came from, was literally, you know, parents and caregivers and teachers asking me questions, and I'd often refer to other stores. And I suppose, you know, sometimes the products I would have found helpful in the clinic, they might have been hard to get in Ireland. So I started to source and make my own products.
But just to ask you there, you kind of mentioned fine motor and gross motor, but for anybody who isn't aware of why people might be coming on, what kind of issues might people who needed those boxes at the start, what kind of things were they presenting?
So it could be something from, like, a handwriting difficulty, so a child struggling with button zips, tying their shoelaces. So again, your bilateral coordination, which is the use of two hands together. So it could be a difficulty with hand strength. So for every box, I would try and include a variety of, I suppose, often I would have a variety of fine motor products. It could be something like therapy putty or a fidget tool or a handwriting grip. So it was a variety of those tools that would promote the skill. And then I would have, like, a paragraph explaining in the booklet, what benefit using this tool would be for your child. And then gross motor with things like balance cushions. I would have foam jumpers, a variety of products that I still actually sell on the store, just I suppose now they're all individual products. And again, everything was explained in detail in the box. But I have moved on from the subscription box. I loved it at the time, but in terms of labor and time, I was packing it all in my parents' house. And by the end of it, I was taking over the house with products and boxes. So I then began to move on to selling individual products. And so that's made life a little bit easier. But it was a great starting point, and it gave me an opportunity to trial and test loads of products as well. But having to create, a box every month of new products, like I can't say it wasn't stressful, because there's obviously a limited time to produce this, but it was a great start into the business online store world.
Aoife, can I just ask you there, was there any trend, or have you noticed any trend with any particular product that's more popular that parents or educational staff find most beneficial?
I would say my most popular products, that were also probably two of my first products I ever sold in the store, is probably the suckers and the original balance board. And I think why they're so popular and they've never lost their popularity is because they can be used in so many ways, and for children really of all ages. So if you follow my Instagram page, like I do share videos and reels nearly on a daily basis of different ways to use different products, but these two products can be used in combination with so many other products, but also it's the variety of skills that they promote. So they definitely be my best sellers and always have been. And no matter what I've done since, they still seem to be the most popular.
Aoife, your videos are so helpful. I'm in and out of schools myself, and I hear people referencing them and going to them for new ideas of how to use the product. So keep those up. They're really, really helpful, especially in areas where people might not have access to OT services.
Thank you.
So it might be, if I'm a parent with somebody, a child or a young person who's struggling with anything to do with balance, coordination, writing, dyspraxia, all of those kinds of challenges, developmental coordination. Even if I haven't seen an OT, I can come on to your Instagram page, OTABC, and just find out how I as a parent can support my child.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of people that don't have access to OT, and like with every video or reel or post I share, like I do always add a description at the bottom to kind of explain to parents or caregivers like what this activity actually is working on. But you don't have to have seen an OT. Like a lot of parents, like will come into me in the clinic and say, I'm worried about my child's balance, they're falling and tripping a lot, or I'm worried about their handwriting, they're complaining about having sore hands, or their writing isn't legible, and so on. And if you go onto my Instagram page, like I will have a variety of different videos that I've explained like why this video is going to promote, a skill that, might be bilateral coordination or handwriting difficulty. And so they're completely, I'm not recommending anything for any specific child. It's generic information. But, I have a lot of parents that come into me for the first time that have never seen an OT that might follow me on my page and have said, oh, I bought, maybe the balance beam and the balance board, and, I see an improvement. You don't need like necessarily, a written or an assessment to be able to use a balance board. That actually the original balance board is beneficial for any child really, that you don't always have to see an OT to be able to engage your child in, various activities. An OT really is there to provide you, I suppose, with specific activities, whether that's a sensory diet or a sensory program that meets your child's specific needs. But in the meantime, I mean, early intervention and developing skills is so important. So the earlier it's done, the better, and it's not going to do any harm.
So I think sometimes as parents, quality is something that we worry about or that we struggle with. And, there's so much information on Instagram. It's so important, right, to go to somebody who knows what they're talking about. And then in terms of assessing the quality, what's your process? How do you decide what you sell, what you don't sell? What do you look at?
So I suppose before I ever put a product up on the store, I trial it in the clinic. So I bring it, I always will use it myself. I will assess it in, from safety. Also, like, I'm a big believer in like intrinsic motivation and children to actually enjoy what they're doing. So I would get a variety of children, often over weeks and months, to trial the product. Often I have a lot of close links with local schools, so I would nearly always send the product to whether it's an ASA unit or a mainstream class for them to trial, and always want completely honest feedback back, because I have, it's a great indicator whether something is going to be worth selling. So I suppose it always goes through testing before it ever goes to store. So I often have these products for months on end before I ever would begin to sell them. And I've often got products made and ordered them in and decided, actually, I don't think this is a great fit for me, and then decided not to go with it. So that happens nearly as often as I decide to go with a product.
So if you can anticipate what's going to go down well, can you?
Most of the time, yeah. I think I've got much better with it over time, but most of the time I would have a good indication just from, I suppose, children's feedback, parents' feedback, teachers' feedback about their enjoyment and motivation. But yes, I would over time definitely I have a much better idea of what will work and what might not work.
And I just noticed as well, you've just launched the weighted balls. That's very exciting, a new product.
Yeah, I'm a long time looking for good quality weighted balls, but like often what would also might instigate me ordering a product is that I might have one in the clinic and I see benefit in it, and I'd be recommending it in programs, or people might come back to me. Also, like parent and teacher feedback, we use something like this, or that they come back to me and can let me know like this is really effective. But the weighted balls, yeah, I mean, they provide so many benefits. And I shared a video on them last night of taping a design to a wall and rolling the ball over the tape. That again is motivation for a child. It's not aimlessly just rolling a weighted ball, but there's something that they're aiming for, something they're following a pattern. And again, you're looking at, like, at the end of the day, we're occupational therapists, and children's main occupation life is play. So like even in the clinic, everything for me is done through play, because that's really how you can engage children. So even the way the balls, like I have a good parents message me, be like, God, I would never have thought to roll them over a piece of tape. And it's something so simple, and you don't need a load of equipment to do these activities either.
Yeah, it just gives ideas for structure, especially for children that might have difficulty with coming up with an idea of how to use a product in play.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's so important, though, that because there are so many products, sometimes it can feel like I need to get them all. I've got to do everything, or else I'm not kind of providing the right support for my child. But you're saying, that you can choose the right things for you, and kind of going online and looking at the site, you can get an idea of what other options are. It doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always would say as well, I'm not always amazing at getting back to messages, but I'm always happy, for parents or caregivers or teachers to message me. And, obviously I don't know the background history of the child, or, their specific profile, but if I can advise from, I suppose, maybe a generic perspective, but also getting a little bit more information about the child's age and their ability, and I suppose the parents or caregivers' main concern, that I am happy to advise. Some parents do come into me and they've bought absolutely everything on the store, but you don't need everything. And like often parents are buying the same products that are promoting very similar skills, where they could spend their money more wisely by buying maybe one product that's promoting balance or bilateral coordination, something else that promotes hand strength and so on. That you don't need everything, and it can be overwhelming in terms of when you go onto the store and there's so much available and you don't know what to pick. But I am happy for people to message me to get a little bit more insight into different products.
So Aoife, the business has grown, things are going from strength to strength. I'm sure your day-to-day working life has changed over the last year or two. Could you give us a sample of what working life and what a typical day looks like for you at the minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I do Monday to Friday every morning is do my emails, and that's a combination of emails I saw from the clinic, but also I still do probably 90% of the customer service from the store. So I always like to go into the clinic with emails completed, and then I suppose it also, a big part of my morning will be talking to my suppliers in terms of keeping on top of stock. I do have a warehouse in Galway, which has really eased my workload. So as I said at the beginning of the podcast, that I would have packed everything myself. It was a real family effort. I had everyone involved in it. But about 2 years ago, I got a warehouse, and it's just been phenomenal in terms of I can really focus on product development and, you know, use my time a bit more wisely. So sorry, staying on point. So yeah, I usually answer my emails, get in touch with the warehouse, make sure all stock and everything is running smoothly. Then usually I'm in the clinic in the mornings. That might be assessments or therapy sessions. And I usually spend an average of kind of 3 to maybe 6 hours daily in the clinic. And then it's more admin when I come home, and that again is the clinic, and it's the warehouse and stock and suppliers. And I spend most of my evening, I love to say it's just Monday to Friday. It doesn't always happen. It does tend to creep into the weekends. But I have to say, since that's like being the biggest, I suppose, progression with the business is having a warehouse, and they do, you know, the stock take, barcodes, send products or send orders. So that's been like huge in terms of you know, my own time that I can focus. I had started working part-time in the clinic for the reason being that I just didn't have time to give it full time. But now that I have the warehouse, I have added, you know, a few more hours to the clinic. But it's a lovely combination. I think the clinic really complements the store and vice versa. So it's lovely to have a bit of both. And I love Instagram, and I love creating content, which is also another part of my day. Usually that at the weekend, I might create videos or content for the week, and it just makes the week a little bit easier then. And I think with Instagram, like, you know, being consistent is really important. So it is something that I would really prioritize on a weekly basis.
Very busy, Aoife. How do you manage self-care and being your best self for all of those different strands of your business?
Yeah, I think as well, like I have got better over time. I think at the start, like it was quite overwhelming, and, you know, I would have taken everything on myself. I had that kind of control over it where I felt the need to do everything myself. And I think like giving a big part of it away to the warehouse for them to look after, again, has eased my time up. And I do have great friends, and, you know, I'm getting married this year. So I've lots of other things.
Yay, congratulations.
Lots of other things going on. I do prioritize, you know, having a social life and meeting my friends and spending time with my family. I'm lucky. I'm from Westport. My family all live in Westport. So I suppose it'd probably be harder if people were elsewhere. But yeah, I suppose it is a challenge, and it doesn't happen all the time, but it is something that I really try and, you know, implement. I do write, you know, schedule, you know, free time in my diary, and, you know, I do have time to relax. But I suppose I'm really passionate about it. Like I said at the start, you know, it's not like when I wake up in the morning, I'm not like, oh God, I have 100 emails to answer, I have a full day in the clinic. I don't feel that way about it. Like, I enjoy what I do. I'm passionate. There's loads more that I want to do. So I think having that passion, and hopefully it will last, you know, it does make life easier. But to answer your question, like, it is a challenge, but I do try and, you know, make time for having life outside OT ABC.
Aoife, I'm not a pediatric OT, but one of the things that struck me about what you said there earlier was the power of play, and play being our children's kind of primary occupation. And I'm just wondering, as a parent who's, you know, wanting to play with their kids, but maybe worried about, you know, what structure or how do I do that? You know, what approach do I take? Would you have any kind of advice on how you can just get down and play effectively with your kids, if there is such a thing as effective play?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of brings me back to my placement in pediatrics. I remember I had a child in, and, you know, I had all these goals set for the child and how I was going to engage them in a variety of different activities. And this child wouldn't engage with me he just wouldn't, like, as in I had all this like structured play set up, and he was running, he was literally running away from me. And I'll never forget it, my supervisor at the end was like, I let you do that for 45 minutes because I never want you to do it again. And it was honestly, it's something I will never forget. And it was probably one of the biggest learning curves I've ever been on, because I was absolutely like, I was in a sweat. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And she's like, you have to follow their lead. Like, you have to, what are they interested in? What do they want to engage in? And incorporate, so in like in the clinic, or like when you're playing with your child at home, follow what are they actually motivated by? What are their strengths? What are they interested in? And like use that to your advantage. That if a child is actually not interested in it, and I know when I started off as an OT, we would have done a lot of hand over hand, and we use a lot of reward systems, and like that day is kind of going in a way that's now, hand over hand, like that you're engaging a child something they don't want to do. Like you're actually probably dysregulating them while you're pushing them to do something. Similarly with rewards, like you're not getting any really long-term benefit there. Whereas if you can find what your child's interested in, like for example, I remember years ago doing up a sensory program, like an indoor sensory program with a variety of activities, and I remember the mum come back and say, he doesn't want to engage, he just wants to be outside. So I was like, okay, well, let's move this program outside. Is following their lead, following what they are interested and motivated in. And you wouldn't believe the difference. And like often when I'm recommending activities, I say, what's your child enjoy doing? What do they actually want to do? And then we can incorporate different things, like let's do like an obstacle course by walking up the slide. Something they're actually interested in doing can really help with, engaging them, in playing with your child. Because as you said, play is so important, but it should be motivational play, and play that a child actually wants to engage in.
It's allowing you to be in the moment, isn't it? And to try and put all other distractions away and go with the flow. That's going to be really helpful to both therapists and parents listening, I think, Aoife.
Yeah, and sometimes when you make a mistake yourself, it's just something I'll never forget. Like I will never forget that session, and I can still picture the child. And this was like an incredible like sensory integration room, and they had swings, and it was one of the first children I was still a student, but it was one of the first children that I had ever met, one-to-one. And it's just afterwards, and like I'm actually grateful. At the time I was like, why did she let me do 45 minutes of running after him? It's something I've never forgotten since. Running after a child, you're trying to force them to engage in something, it just doesn't work.
Love it. 132,000 followers, Aoife, on Instagram. You're blowing it up. How have you managed that? Why are you so successful on Instagram?
I think being consistent is a big part. And like, I've hit lulls before where maybe followers have slowed down. I've never put a big emphasis or pressure on myself to gain, a certain amount of followers. But I am consistent. It's something that I really prioritize and I really enjoy. And, I give it a lot of time. But, every morning, an odd one I might miss, but like, 9 out of 10 mornings, I will, post something on Instagram. And I think keeping up contact, networking, I'd have a lot of friends on Instagram, different speech and language therapists, other OTs, play therapists that I would have, a lot of communication with. And I think even other people sharing your page, I've often shared other people's pages. And I think really important, like speaking to your audience. So I would give probably half an hour, 40 minutes every day to go through my DMs. Some of them I can't answer, they're very specific, but if I can help someone, I will. And I think even having that contact with someone does really help. But most of all, I think being consistent, sharing things that people actually want to know, what they're interested in, listening to people, asking questions. If the same questions are coming up over and over again, then I'm like, okay, well, this is something worth sharing. I often put up question boxes, what do you want, what do you want to know more about? And you really can gain a lot of insight from your followers, from parents, from caregivers. But overall, I would say being consistent is why the success really is there on Instagram.
No, just the videos are fabulous. They really give so much information, which is really, really helpful. Sorry, Aideen, go on.
Any emerging trends that you're excited about that's on the horizon, Aoife, around social media or product-wise?
I think in terms of trends on social media, I think TikTok is probably the biggest trend. I am very poor for sharing on it, but it is one of my big goals at the minute to start, sharing across from Instagram to TikTok. But I think TikTok is kind of the forward. I really think that's where a lot of things are going in terms of, people are there just to watch videos. Instagram, there's a lot of ads, there's a lot of other content. But I think TikTok is a real emerging I suppose, trend on social media. But also I think the likes of reels have only started, like I say, in the last year or two, but like reels are brilliant. You can share longer reels now, and like I only really started doing videos since Reels became a thing, and I would have noticed an increase in engagement since I started doing Reels. And I think product wise, like products that, you know, promote a variety of skills. So like, you know, again, like the likes of the balance board and those products that can be just used in so many ways. I think, you know, they'll always continue to sell. They'll always provide benefit for children. But I'm no social media expert. I'll never pretend I am. I've never done a social media course or marketing or anything. I just share myself what I think works. And I think that also helps people is like the videos they're not overcomplicated. I'm not using a million different products. I explain, you know, whether it's under the post or during it, I'll explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and how best to use the products. And I think they're easily understood, so parents can implement them straight away in the home, which I think can be helpful as well.
Your videos are really authentic, Aoife. I think that's what has led to your success just as an onlooker. Again, as Jen said, they're so practical. You know what you're supposed to do with this product by watching your videos. So it's a really helpful addition to buying the product, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think you're right, you know, being unique and being authentic and, you know, being a little bit different to other pages. Like now there's a lot of Instagram pages and there's a lot of people providing different products. But I think once you have your niche area and you're a little bit different to other people, there's a reason to follow you because, you know, you're not seeing the same content across, you know, several different pages as well.
Fantastic. You've done so much in the past while with the business and with your practice as well. What are your plans for the future, Aoife? What's next?
So the next thing, from a personal perspective, the next thing is probably get married. I'm getting married in September and very excited about that. Lots of planning going on at the minute. And I suppose from a work business perspective, for now, continue on what I'm doing. And we've lots of new products in development that are going kind of through the trial basis now. I don't think I'm ever going to change too far from that. Like I absolutely love product development. I love sharing videos on how you use them. So business wise for this year anyway, that is the biggest, I suppose, goal. I did my first webinar about 2 weeks ago, which I really enjoyed with Debbie Cullinan. She's a play therapist. So definitely wouldn't mind going down, I suppose, more the training route as well and sharing that knowledge kind of webinar based. I was delighted to have started that. It's something I've been meaning to do for a long time. So I suppose, yeah, they're the kind of personal business plans of 2023 so far anyway.
Brilliant. And we're going to finish off just with a little fun question. If you won 25k for your business, how would you spend it?
I would definitely spend it on product development. Like no doubt. If I had, yeah, it's what I put every cent profit I have, it goes towards, you know, creating new products, trialing new products. So that's definitely, without a second guess, it would be in product development.
And what's your own personal favorite product? If you had one that you could choose to never give up, what would it be?
I would say definitely the suckers. I
love a sucker.
Honestly, no matter what child comes into the clinic, no matter what the difficulty is, I will end up using the suckers for one reason or another. And it's not always that I'm working on hand strength or fine motor skills, but it's because they're so motivational. I could be working on, you know, balance or core strength, and at some point the suckers are going to be included because kids, and honestly, younger kids, you know, I've mini suckers as well, which are a lot easier to pull. But then the older kids, like for any age, they're motivational. I had like a 13-year-old in the other day, and her parents had bought her a box previously, and she was like showing me what she does with them. So she had a sucker in her hand and like she was firing at the window and showing me how they'd stick, and that's not even something I thought about before. And I was like, God, you learn so much from the kids themselves. And that was a teenager using them to, you know, for target practice.
As a weapon.
Or as a weapon, yeah. So no, in fair, yeah, the suckers were one of my first sellers, and something I've used since I, you know, started off as an OT. And to this day, I would say nearly in every clinic session, I would use them at some stage.
I can understand that. They're so colourful and fun looking. Yeah, you'd be drawn. Well, Aoife, that was really enjoyable. We've learned a lot from talking to you this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, and we wish you every success as your business continues to grow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really enjoyable.
That's that's all for today's episode on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it informative and engaging. If you've any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at irishotpodcast@gmail.com or connect on Instagram or Facebook.
And remember to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback is important and helps us to improve the show, so please do leave it. Thank you for listening to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by myself, Jen Trachak.
And myself, Aileen Rutledge.
We look forward to sharing more insights and knowledge with you in future episodes. Until then, take care.